Well, it worked. Bud, are you in top form today?
We'll see.
We'll see, indeed. Um, we're talking. I think the main push is going to be talking about TK, the TK panel. And before I forget, Bud has arranged for a discount on the packet if you choose to buy it. TK, what is it, 15? Is that what the?
Uh, this month is actually 25% off. I'll show
Oh,
you the
okay.
slide. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll let you describe that as you get started. But if you end up using Amy's excellent picture of the black orchid, I did edit that myself just to see what I could come up with. So I'll be happy to share that if you want.
Why don't we take a quick look at that? I'm not going to go through it, step by step, but because we have so much to talk about the TK, if that's okay.
Well, we can do that, and if there's time at the end, I can show this. I mean, it's I
Gosh,
just I took it in a completely different direction, and it will infuriate Amy, I am sure.
well, let's start with that.
Okay, all right. You want to upset Amy? So be it.
Yeah, let's go
I'll
for
just
it.
share my screen. What I did was I didn't like the background as much as maybe I could have done. There was a little bit of patchiness in it, so I thought, well, I'll change the background. And then I was not crazy about the stem, so I thought I'd just go with abstract. And because, as you know, my number one concern in post processing is speed so that I can get on with everything I've got to do. So I just did a very simple retouch. There was some artifact around this petal that I just clone stamped out. I cleaned up the edges here. I just masked out the stem, and then I took both of these colors, the burgundy color from inside this part of the petal and the yellow here, and created an inverted gradient. I did it both ways actually. Um, I'll show you what I mean. I did it fading to the yellow, and I didn't like that. I thought it was a bit better in the other direction. So I rather liked it. There were a few tiny little bits and pieces around the edges that there was a little bit of motion, I think, artifact down here that I just clone stamped out. So that's what I would do. I thought I love the composition of the original photograph, and if you look in, there's lots of fantastic. Oh, I missed a piece, a hair or something. There's lots of awesome detail in this. I mean, I really liked it, and with these little ripply bits on the leaves. So I tried to leave all that alone, but I thought in the original the petals were so dark I couldn't really see this detail. And the only other thing I did was brush over with a burn tool and just slightly tone down these bright spots. That's it. Otherwise, I love the picture, and yeah, that's what I did with it anyway.
Well, if we can get Amy to share her screen and see what she did, and then I will do the same.
Sounds like a winner.
Let me see if I can share the correct screen here. Oh, I might have to turn my camera off for a second. It interferes with my mouse.
I always feel a little bit self-conscious in touching somebody else's photograph. It's one thing in a private tutoring type session, but I do feel funny about editing somebody else's picture if I hadn't talked to them. Ooh, I like this. This
Yeah.
is
So I think I kind of had the same thoughts that you had about it. I didn't really like the out of focus stem, so I thought, well, that has to go. And I kind of wanted to make it look sort of, to me, this is sort of like a spaceship escaping the orbit of a planet or something.
yeah, I love that diagonal
Yeah.
background. Lovely. That's clever.
Mhm.
And you've preserved the blackness of it, which is, of course, its key feature, I guess. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah, black flowers are rare actually, so the and it's actually not completely black, but it looks pretty black in person.
I like that. I like that better than what I came up with.
And
That's
she got rid of the stem as well.
Yep, I got rid of the stem and then I got rid of that little hair over there.
the one I missed.
Yeah.
This little
You
area.
did a much better job of that edge than I did. The contrast there looks much better. Nice.
I zoomed way in and did that. I went all the way around all of these edges. And then I went in here and I think I just, I don't know, you can see what I did over here each step. Here's where I got rid of the stem right in here. Then I did some color grading just for the contrast and stuff. Then I think I also brightened up some of this area where the white is.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I didn't do really anything with the color of the flower.
Well, I messed
like
with the
it.
color a little bit, so I can show you what I did.
All right. Let's see.
So far, Amy's in the lead, bud.
She'll probably stay in the lead. Let me share. Let's go into, let's see, I want this one.
And I did use my TK9 panel that you're going to talk about in more depth. So
Awesome.
I can't wait to hear about that. Yeah.
So this is what it looked like after I ran it through Zareen. And I cleaned it up a little bit with denoise because it wasn't that many images. So this was basically the image to start with. And then I took it to here. So if you want to me, the image by itself, let's see if I can get it back down here. Why isn't that working? Too many on the top. So I got the image to this this level and decided that I needed more green around it. But basically what I chose to do, let me blow it up for you, is I took some of this dark red color and I did a lights TK mask that highlighted all of the bright spots on these leaves. And then I painted that color through that mask to give some color to all those whitish glitter highlights in the thing. I brightened up the edges a bit. I lightened up some of this and increased the contrast. Tried to keep the overall brightness toward the dark side. And I liked the reddish stuff, so I kept the red, but tried to keep the black. And I kept the stem, but I darkened it and blurred it quite a bit. And then I framed it. So this is the final product. I thought you would like to see what it looked like framed, because being able to print an image and actually see it in a frame does a lot more for it. But I kept some of the reddish tinge, probably more than the flower has, but tried to keep it dark.
Yep. I like all of them, so kind of depends on what mood you're in.
That frame was generated by AI.
Mhm.
It's gaudy.
The frame, yeah. The flower,
It's supposed to be. That's the whole point.
yeah. I mean, a flower like this should be in your face.
What, you want it to be like an Italian Renaissance going on?
Yeah, I thought the AI was American. I
It's-
thought it was American
No.
intelligence.
Well, if you ask for an antique, if you ask for an antique frame, this is what you get.
Yeah,
An
yeah.
antique frame that matched the colors in the picture.
You know, I would take a couple of points off in the competition, Bud, for the it feels imbalanced. It feels like there's not enough room on the right.
Yeah, it looks
Am
like
I
it
the
is.
only one seeing that?
I disagree a little bit.
You like-
Okay, good.
Because the reason I disagree is because you have the points, the 3 points,
Hmm.
and that holds you into the center,
True.
along with the extra pulling out of a detail.
I
So
left
it's not
extra-
hitting, to me, it's not hitting the frame at all. If you wanted to cut the frame and cut the frame towards the third level in and cut it back to that, I would take out the 1.5 or 2 inches of the outer part of the frame. That was
Yeah, no,
all.
the frame was just an afterthought.
Yeah,
gave
but I
you
think that
more
frame
room.
is good.
No, I'm not. No, I mean the framing of the flower itself.
Well, yeah, I still disagree with you. I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I don't like things necessarily centered in the frame because it
right.
I
like the
normally
angle.
don't, but in this case, it just looks like there's too much greenery on the left, is what makes it feel slightly out of balance to
I
me.
did that on purpose, Alan, because the flower is leaning in that direction.
True.
The frame doesn't look straight, although it is. Bit of
Yeah,
an
it's
optical illusion.
You know, you can't trust AI.
Oh, I'm surprised that neither one of you thought to make a stereo pair. It really does look cool with this flower because
I bet this would be I didn't have the original images. I just had the TIFF.
Yeah.
But
Any
that would
comments,
make
Amy,
a
on
great stack. That would make a great stereo pair.
I can send you my stack if you want, Amy. I just we've got a lot to do with TK. So do you have any comments on Alan or my or what you want to do with it?
no, I liked to see what you guys did with it. I think it's interesting that me and Alan did almost the exact same thing, just with a different color.
Yeah, I think you did yours more successfully. I like all of them too. So good. This would be a good thing for us to open with every time, I think.
Well, I was going to do a recap slide, but we
Go for
basically
it.
we hardly got going. So this is really going to be the TK intro, not the one last time. We talked mostly about photo AI and sharpening. So
Sure.
I can add a slide and send it to you so you can put it in the video or whatever you want to do, Alan.
Okie doke. Do that, and I'll just drop it in at the beginning.
Anybody else have anything they want to say before we start again?
No, I like it.
TK?
Nope, good to go, I think. Have at it, bud.
All right. Well, let's see what we can do here. I'm gonna.
Now, tell me, bud, what exactly is TK as a panel? Is it just how would you describe it?
It's a collection of actions produced by Tony Kuiper, and this is the 9th version.
Okay, so it is literally then just a Photoshop add-on. It doesn't have any actual.
No, this
Okay,
he has done some manipulations that would take you 30 steps to do
got it.
and
Got
put
it.
it into one click.
Okay,
So basically, it's a collection of shortcuts, but it makes your life a lot easier. So what I want to do first off is show you Tony's site real quick. I have no affiliation with Tony, and I don't think Alan does at this point. Do you, Alan?
I do not.
Okay. So this is what Tony's site looks like. And you can see right now, 25% off on, he has everything in capitals. So I mean, that's as good as it gets. This is all free stuff on his site. And this is just below what you just saw. So as you scroll down, you've got a older TK luminosity mask that you can get for free and play with it. And you'll see after this presentation that this might be worth doing if you're considering it. But there's one for print. There's one for the Gen Fill, so the new how to use the Gen Fill. There's one for the new selection brush. You can get your linear profiles for free here. This is actions for Photoshop Elements. And here is free 10 steps to getting started with Photoshop. So pretty good amount of free stuff. This entire page that you see in front of you is free. When you
Mike,
buy it, go ahead.
Mike Canfer shared with me a video on the TK print panel this week.
Yeah,
That is a really powerful set of shortcuts. If
it is.
anybody does a lot of printing, it's very capable.
Very capable.
Oh, good.
You can see that the price of the TK9, which is the newest version, is $33. Take 25% off of that, and it gets really affordable. Sean Bagshow does videos, and he is absolutely right on. He's very taciturn. There's no fluff. It's just to the point stuff. And this button by button guides, I think, has 51 videos.
Holy moly.
For 33 minus 25%. So he goes through every button and tells you what every button does and a little bit how to use it, but not in depth because this is a button by button guide and not a how to. And if you want to get started with TK, again, free. This is also by Sean Bagshow. If you want to know about luminosity masks, both basic and advanced, Sean Bagshow has done these. They're absolutely phenomenal. They're $25 each, and I think that's with 25% off of that. So you can have all the education you really want about luminosity masking and the TK9 panel. It's that easy. He does other things, Sean does, and one of the superb things that I have, and there are 6 hours of education on how to use smart objects. So if you thought there's only one way to use them, there's a lots of ways that you can use these things to make your life easier. So he's reduced it from $55 to $40, and Tony Kuiper said everything on the site was 25 off, so it means it's 30. If my math is any good. So let's jump into the panel. So this is what the panel looks like. There are other things around it, but this is our workhorse. And I'm going to show you, with Dave Kelly's permission, a video following this quick presentation. The only reason I wanted to go through these is so you would have some familiarity when you watch Dave goes through stuff, because sometimes it gets a little quick. But this is the main area. So that the top here, this is luminosity masking. This is zone. We're not going to cover this one. I'll just tell you, you can make a mask with blend diff, but that's not part of what we're talking today. And this is color. So you can choose a color like yellow in your image if you have a bug with yellow spots, and it'll highlight it for you. This is the saturation vibrance mask. So it'll pick out the most saturated or the least saturated areas. This does an edge mask. This is a focus mask. And this is access to any masks that you have created. So this will add a mask to your level. This is output as a selection hamburger, and this is the color grading. So let's go through it real quick. So these are the different parts of that panel. So if you go back to the panel and you chop it up into parts, when you open this one, luminosity mask, this is what you get. Okay. So we're going to look at the choose mask. These are channels, and these are view options. The view options, you can add this small grayscale to the bottom of an image. It won't print, but as you change things, it lets you see which part of the grayscale you're affecting. If you prefer it in red, this is a red overlay. This is back and forth between mask and your main image, and this is to get out of it and go back to the main board. Okay. This set is where most of the work is done. These are the light masks, which I'll demonstrate. These are the dark masks. In other words, a dark mask, if I want to select out the shadows, I could look at a 4 or 5 and pick out the shadows. Now, a mask, remember, anything that's light, it lets whatever you're trying to do through. So let's say you're adding some blue into the shadows. You don't want it up into the light areas. So you pick you out a mask in the dark areas that you can add some bluish color to. And these are midtone masks, which I'll describe. So this is where you pick out a mask that focuses on an area that you're interested in changing. This next one has a light gray background to it, and all of these adjust a mask. So once you have the mask, you could open the levels and make that mask brighter and the highlights are darker. So you can increase the contrast in the mask to help you focus in on what you want to see. The bottom one is the output. So once you get your mask like you want it, I can output it to a curve. So the curve will open with the mask I've just created. Levels can open to the mask I just created, etc. Hue, saturation, brightness, contrast. So this is the main workhorse. This is where you choose those things. This is the RBG. Let's say that you've chosen 3 lights masks, and now you can just scroll through and click on the red mask, green mask, blue mask. These are channels. So red channel, green channel, blue channel, cyan, magenta, yellow, and see if any of those actually helps you get a better mask, but it's still going to be a zone 3 mask. You're just seeing how each of these channels might help you or not, or you just choose RGB, which is the default. This one, as I mentioned, is the adjustment. So you can adjust with levels, you can adjust with a curve, you can use a black brush, white brush, and there's a whole hamburger list of things you can do. At the bottom is the output. This is when you're ready to make a layer. If I want a layer that's hue, saturation, and I've chosen the blue parts of the clouds because I want the sky because I want to mess with it, I choose hue, saturation. It puts my sky, cloud, whatever mask on there, and then I can adjust this through the light parts of the mask I just created. Remember, the light parts of the mask let the effect through. The dark parts of the mask withhold that effect. This again is the viewing stuff that I told you about. So this is the luminosity, and that's how you choose it. It puts a green thing around it. And I'm going to show you how this works real quick in just a second. But this is what happens when you open the luminosity, the one on the far left with the red square around it. If you open the one next to it, this is a zone mask, and the window that opens is somewhat different. It looks like this. Again, this is the workhorse area inside the green. You can use this eyedropper and click on an area inside your image. And let's say I've picked out an area that's just below zone 5. It'll show me where that is. I could pick out a darker area and it'd be down here. Now, zone masks are best utilized between what is zone 2 and zone 8. And luminosity masks are best utilized at both ends of the spectrum. So this is a demonstration on where it is. Now you can change that by sliding this back and forth to optimize your mask. This part over here is like a window, a feather. So whatever this is got a big feather on it. And as you move this, it tightens it up until you have a very narrow area of selection. This area brightens it. So if your white areas aren't white enough, you just keep moving this bright area over. So you tighten and lighten. And so this will let more effect go through. Middle gray lets less effect, even less effect down below. Color looks like this. And what happens when you click on a color is one of those color picker windows comes up, and you just say, okay, you don't have to move it. But it'll show you what color you've picked. Here I picked a near red. You can, again, tighten the window by moving these together, or you can broaden it to include more colors. So you're also seeing your black and white mask as you move these around, because you're moving it around this color that you picked out. This side is a feather. So basically you can feather in just like we did before. So this is the color aspect of tighten. Over here, you can brighten the mask. Remember, masks are all black and white, even though you're dealing with color. If I've picked out this reddish color, I can now make that reddish color whiter in the mask, so it lets more of what I want to do to that color show through. And this is just a reminder to go to Photoshop. So I will do that. And we will click on it up here. And now we'll play with it in the mask. So let's go. Can you see where I am up here to the top right? I'm on the panel. Anybody see that?
Yeah, I'm having to move my zoom.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay.
So I'm going to click on the luminosity panel to start with. And so what I'm going to do, here's a grayscale. This is continuous grayscale, and this is 9 zones. So if I'm picking out something toward the white side and I click on number 2, watch what happens to the scale. You see how it's now more confined to the brighter side? I can confine it even more. So each time it becomes more restrictive as you go toward the brightest area. Okay. So now the only place that's going to get effect would be the brightest clouds and up in the sky. Everything else can't see it because it's black. There's a transition zone of gray. Okay. Let's go the other direction. Let's go to a dark. So now we're lighting up the dark side because we want the effect to go through the dark side. That's where our mask is going to be the lightest. So if we go here, it gets more restrictive into the shadows, more restrictive yet, still more restrictive. Now we're down into the darkest shadows. This is where I wanted to put some hue saturation blue into my shadows. I've got a good mask to work with, okay? And even more so. So let's come back to say here, let me open up a levels. Remember, this is where we can adjust things. So if you look over to the right on the levels panel, and I start to pull this in, you see how the white is getting whiter as you would expect. If I move the center one, I can change the feather. If I move the dark one, I can change the darkness. So I can really confine what I wanted to do into those shadows. Okay. Now, there's another one. It's the midtones. Let's take a look at midtones. So this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So let's look at 1. It's barely it's for subtle changes. A little bit less subtle and more subtle. So what you notice about midtones is both the the highlights and the darks are eliminated from an effect. The only effect is going into midtones, okay? And so if we again use the levels slider, we can even increase the brightness. We can increase the darkness. And we can play with the feather. That's a midtone mask. So all the effects, say you wanted to put some sunlight, but you only wanted that sunlight, that yellow, to go into some of those midtones. This is how you would do it that quick. Okay. All right, let's get out of here. The X up at the top gets me back to the main menu. You know, I didn't show you the red, it's the black and white. I won't show you anyway. So let's look at the zone now real quick before I show you Dave's video. So when you do a zone, it pops up like so. You're not going to use a color picker, but let's go over here and click zone 4 and you'll watch the little circle move around. You see where it jumped to? Okay. And you just say, okay. And so what it's done is it picked out what I called a zone 4. All right. So up here, I told you that I could move it around and you have to let it go. But see, I can move it all over the place and I can really pick out that component that I wanted. Okay. I can come up here and click on zone 4. I can click on zone 5. I can click on zone 6, 7. And down here, let's say that's a zone 7. Remember I told you this tightened up. So as I move it, you can see it tightening up the feather. Okay. And I told you this one lightened it up so I can make it wider and wider for more effect. So I can pick out a very tight zone, or I can pick out a zone that spreads out a little bit, and I can control how much of the effect I want to go through. This still lets me do things with the levels. As I'll show you, you can play with it. So all of the light gray lets you modify what's going on here. Any quick questions before I start Dave's video?
Yeah, I have a quick question, also probably a comment. It's so when I've been using this for past 10, 15 years, because I've had it from the original, you can actually see, you know, sometimes if you have decided your variation, you get to play with it even more when you can actually see what it's selecting in the mask on your image.
David's going to show that when I show the video. He's doing a landscape and you'll be able to see how he picks out stuff.
Okay.
But I just wanted you to be familiar with what the tools were, so you could at least, you know, have a shot at it. Okay. Any other questions before I start the video? All right. Oop. How do I get back to my picture? I lost my Zoom here. Let's see.
Click on the icon at the bottom of the screen, bud.
I did, and all it brought up was this back to meeting. Okay. Not going back to the meeting. I'll have to, I guess, come back in again. I don't know.
No, go to your toolbar that has all your apps and then just click on the Zoom button.
Yep.
Toolbar with all the apps. I did. And I get this pink screen, which is weird. Let me unshare here. Maybe that's what I need to do. Okay, I got it back. So now I'm going to share again. That's not working. I keep getting the introductory thing going on here.
What app are you showing the video in, bud?
I'm in the Zoom workplace.
Right, but which app are you going to run
Trying
the
to get
video
to
on?
trying to get to Keynote. All right, I'm back at the main screen. I don't know, you might can see me or not.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get try share. But what it does when I do the share, oh, here's Keynote right here. Got it.
Yeah.
Was
Open
already open.
Keynote and then share.
I got it. All right, so this is our video. I'm going to hit play. And this is Dave Kelly. He does the joy of editing, and he's phenomenal.
You're not sharing yet, but
Not sharing yet, okay? Huh. Well, now. All right, let's go back into Zoom.
what you might want to do is just hit share, then select Keynote as the app, and then hit share again, and that'll open just your Keynote.
I think this is where I am, but I'm not seeing my. It says Keynote.
Underneath where it has the different screens that you can select, there's also the option for selecting just the apps you want to share. It might be
Yeah.
easier. There you go.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Oh, cool. All right. So this is Dave Kelly, Joy of Editing. Every Friday, he does a TK Friday, and he goes through and he will do a full edit on an image and show you all the tricks and all the pearls of how to do it. And he is the master, without exception. So I wanted to make sure you knew this. And if you need, if the 25% is not effective, the DK15 will get you 15% off, and Dave makes a little money off of it. Again, I have no affiliation with Dave, but he did us a favor letting us show this video, so we don't have any kind of conflict. So if you're ready, let's do the play on this thing. Let's see how to do that. Get up here. Uh-oh. That wasn't good. To go black. Oh. Well. I'm not sure what's going on. I can't get a play button. I'm in Keynote. I'm going to go to play here. Play is grayed out.
You might need to go into presentation mode, bud.
Still with me? Presentation mode, where's that?
It'll going to be in one of the top menus. I'll get standing up as well, see if I can.
Sorry, guys. This was working very well. Always a glitch of some sort, isn't it?
If you double clicked on the slide. Oh, the open slide.
It looks like the whole thing's dead. I may have to get out of it and come back in. Let me do that. I'm going to stop the share. I am going to close Keynote.
When it's back up, bud, have a look for the play menu. I think that's going to be the one that
It was all
gives
grayed
you the
out. I think it just crashed.
Okay.
So let's go to Keynote and open Keynote again. And let's go to recent.
If that doesn't work, you could just go to your browser and play it directly from YouTube.
Except it has I recorded it so it wouldn't have all the political ads and stuff. That
Oh, okay, okay, all right, good move.
So
Play the recording direct and don't go through the other piece of software.
you don't?
I said go you recorded it and took out the ads, go directly to that file and play that file instead of going through your presentation.
Yep, that's what I think will probably bypass all that.
Okay. Is that showing up? Not yet?
Yeah, not sharing just yet.
Okay, let me get back into share. I'm in QuickTime Player. So let's go to Zoom. Let's share. And I'm going to share the QuickTime Player. Share and play.
Start out by talking about luminosity.
Is that working?
Yep.
All right.
Go to full screen if you can.
Now, when should you use a zone mask? When should you use a luminosity mask? And I think this will really help you out. So let me go ahead and click on the luminosity mask button. And you're going to notice we have our lights 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when you click across here, this is lights 1, this is lights 2. And you notice we're narrowing down to the lightest lights, lights 3. The lesser lights will drop off and the lighter lights will stay. Here's lights 4, lights 5, and lights 6. And that's that lightest area right there. And then darks, I'll click on darks 1. So here's darks 1, and the range keeps narrowing down. Darks 2, darks 3, darks 4, darks 5, and darks 6. And the light areas are the very darkest darks. And by the way, if you don't want to generate a mask after opening up the luminosity mask, just click on this X and they go away. So let me say this about luminosity masks. And I'll talk about lights first. Whenever you want to include the darkest darks in a luminosity mask, then a darks luminosity mask is the mask that you want. Now let's talk about midtones. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the luminosity masks again. Now midtones, let me click on, we have 3 midtones. We have a midtones 1, a midtones 2, and a midtones 3. They're all midtones. They're just getting progressively lighter as we go. Now let me say this about a midtones mask. A midtones mask, and this is very important, is a no lights or a no darks mask. So you notice right here in this black area right here, that is the lightest area of the image right in here. And it's not selected. And I believe down in the black areas down in here, these are the darkest shadows. So they're not included. And so whenever you don't want to include the lightest lights or the darkest darks, then you want a midtones luminosity mask. And when I always open up my full edits and I do that midtones 3, which is what you're seeing right now, that's why I say, if you want to protect your shadows and highlights from clipping, use the midtones 3 and then apply it to a color grading tool. And that is what protects me from clipping highlights and shadows, this midtones mask. Remember, a midtones mask will not contain any dark tones or any light tones. It's only going to include midtones only. So it's a great mask. And it's also a great mask if you want to just lighten up midtones. And I do that all the time in my full edits. For instance, I'll take a midtones 1. It's the darkest of the mask. So it's going to be a more subtle adjustment. And then I'll apply it to a curves adjustment layer and I'll change it to the screen blend mode. And you see how it just gently lightens up those midtones. And then I have an opacity that I can pull back. So that's a great use for it. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click on the trash can and get rid of that layer. And now to recap, if you want to include the lightest lights in a mask, or if you want to make a mask to include the darkest darks, you want a luminosity mask. Or if you want a mask just to target the midtones of the image, a luminosity mask is great for that. And now let's talk about zone masks. I will be demonstrating all these masks, but I feel it's important that you really understand what each of these masks do up front. A zone mask. This is a mask that will include a specific tonal range, somewhere in between lights and darks. And it also has the benefit of some really cool sliders in it. You always hear me talk about, let's tighten and lighten. Well, we're going to get into that, but let's go ahead and open up the zone mask. So let me click this icon right here, open up your zone masks. But first you have to pick a zone. For instance, if I wanted to target this zone right here, like this little dark strip along here, if I click on that and click OK, you will notice it is sitting right here. This slider can be moved and adjusted, by the way, but you'll notice that this zone sits between a 2 and a 3. This is the slider to lighten up the selection. I call it a selection. We're making a mask, but the light areas will be the selected areas. And then we can tighten those areas by dragging this slider into the left, which is really cool. And you don't get this in a luminosity mask, but you do get it in a zone mask. And I find that the zone mask is a mask that I use probably more often than any other mask. Now, as a side note, to refine like a luminosity mask, you can use any of these tools here to do it. But more often than not, I use this levels adjustment. It's kind of like a tighten and lighten situation here, but it's different. But you do have that ability to do that in a luminosity mask too. But here it's just right here using these 2 sliders for refinement. It's quick and easy, and more often than not, that's all you need to do. And now comes a tip. When should I use a luminosity mask versus a zone mask? Well, let me show you. See this button here? It looks like a little eyedropper. Just click on that. And when you do, you see your image again. And your color picker comes up. And so here's my tip. Let's click on the light area right here. So I'm going to click this and click OK. And now we can immediately see where that sits in the zone. It's way past the zone 9. It's at a 250. So it's very, very light. Probably not a good candidate for a zone mask. Here's my tip for you. If you use this eyedropper tool and you click somewhere on the image, let me just click right here and click OK. And you'll notice that sits in between 2 and 8. Whenever you pick a zone, and if it's somewhere in between zones 2 and 8, it's the perfect candidate for a zone mask. And so that should be really helpful to you. The zone mask can be a helpful tool to determine whether you do need to use a luminosity mask or a zone mask. So let me show you. Let's click on the eyedropper tool again. And now let me pick like a dark area right down in here and click OK and see where that zone hits. See, that zone hits under a zone 1. So again, it's not a good candidate for a zone mask. So I would want to use a luminosity mask for that. Doesn't mean I couldn't use a zone mask, because you can, but really luminosity mask would probably be a better choice. And now let me go ahead and click the eyedropper tool again, and let's click like right in this area here and click OK. And now we can see that this is a little bit over zone 8, so I could probably use a luminosity mask or a zone mask. Let's try another spot, like maybe right here. Let's click OK. And now we can see that this sits at right at a zone 5. So this again would be a good candidate for a zone mask. And then don't forget, you got the tighten slider, so we can really tighten up that area and really select it really well, tighten it up, and then we can lighten it up and really get it to where it's really isolating that area. Then I can output it to a color grading tool, a curves adjustment, whatever we want to output it to, but we'll get into that later. But right now I'm explaining this stuff to you. So now you know that if it's between a zone 2 and an 8, a zone mask is really good for you. If it's a 1 or under or a 9 or over, it's a good candidate for a luminosity mask. And so you can see here, you can use a zone mask to determine, do I need a luminosity mask or do I need a zone mask? Especially if you're starting out with TK8 plugin for Photoshop. I think this tip can be very helpful for you. After a while, you just get to know exactly what you're doing and you don't need to do that. But starting out, this might be a good way to learn. And now, how about a couple examples for luminosity masks and zone masks? So let's go ahead and use this test method. Let me click on the eyedropper tool, and we're going to go to this light area right here, and I click OK, and I see, well, that sits at 251 here above a 9. I would probably want to use a luminosity mask to adjust that light area. Okay, so I'm going to click X to get out of here. Now, these light areas I'd like to tone down a little bit, and to do that, I can use a curves adjustment layer in a multiply blend mode to darken up those really light areas. So I'm determining that I need a luminosity mask. So I'll click on the luminosity mask button. I want to narrow this selection down more to this really light area. So I'm going to work down through here. Here's a 2, lights 2. Here's a lights 3. Here's a lights 4. Here's a lights 5. That's probably too isolated. So I'm going to go to a lights 4. And also note by default, we're set for RGB, red, green, and blue, but we can isolate this to a red channel, green channel, blue, cyan, magenta, or yellow. And to do that, you just click through here. In other words, I am on a lights 4. Let's check the red channel. And see, that's not targeting enough of the areas. Here's a green. That's pretty good. Here's a blue. Wow, way too broad. Here's a cyan. Still too broad. Here's magenta. And here's yellow. Not good either. So in this case, I think I'll just use RGB. It's a good idea to test these different channels out to see if you can get the isolation that you want. So I'm just using RGB. Okay, now I need to output this. And I'm just going to output it and have this effect go over the entire image. And to do that, I need to pick an output source here. And remember, I said I want to use the curves adjustment layer. So I'll click on this, and it attaches that mask to the curves adjustment layer. And now I want to change the blend mode to multiply to darken all those really light lights. And I'll just click it, and you see what happens there. Now, if I don't want it in the foreground here, and you can see right up in here, it's done a great job. So just look at the sky. Here's the before and here's the after. See how it's toned down those really hot lights up there. Now, if I don't want it here, I can just click on this mask, click on the select sky button. It'll select the sky. Photoshop will select the sky for us. And once I have that selected, I can invert it so I can get the foreground. And then I can use this fill button right here and fill that with black, click OK. And now it removes it from the foreground. Now you can see I have marching ants here. I can just click this button right here to deselect my selection here. But here's the before and here's the after, only up in the sky. Now today I'm not getting into mask calculations and all that stuff. This is basically just a masking workshop, okay? I might do another tutorial where I get into more specific things like more elaborate masking techniques using calculations and all that stuff. Okay, now for the next thing I want to do, you see these darker areas right in here? I want to darken them up more just to build up a little more contrast here. And to do that, what I always like to do is use a curves adjustment layer. I'll put a black mask on it to hide what I'm going to do right now because I'm going to put this in a multiply blend mode, which will darken the entire image. But we don't see the image has gotten darker because of this black mask. Now, let me click on the zone mask here, and let's check this out. Let's find some of these darker tones, like right in here. And you can see that's where it sits. I'll click OK. So that's right around the zone 4. And it's really isolating that area. Now, it follows my tip. It's between a zone 2 and an 8, so a zone mask is perfect for that. So now I can drag this tightening slider to the left and really isolate those dark tones in there. They're not super dark. They're right around a zone 4, and then I can lighten it up so they'll take the effect a little stronger. So I'm going to go ahead and really lighten that up to right around there. And now I'm going to output it to a black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection because I want to paint this on. And I'm going to use about, I'll start with 20% opacity. I'll type my 2 key. And I have a nice soft edge brush. It doesn't really matter that much, but I'm just going to start painting over these areas. And see how I can just darken those. Isn't that cool? So really nice. And by the way, if you want to see what your mask looks like, you can click this button. You can see my sky is protected here. That's a beautiful thing about this zone mask. It's really protecting my sky. If I paint out into the sky, it's not going to do anything. So click this button and it loads it back up as a selection. So I can keep painting over in these areas. Every time I lift my brush and paint again, you hear me say this all the time in my TK Friday tutorials, I'll add more of the effect. And I'm just going to go like this. Okay. And that looks pretty good. So let's take a look. Just at these darker tones up here. So here's the before and here's after, but see how beautiful of a job that is done. So that's a case where the zone mask was perfect because it was in that range between zones 2 and 8, where the sky was, it was above zone 9. 9 and above is a perfect candidate for a luminosity mask. I'll show you a couple examples working with another zone mask and a luminosity mask, and then I'll move on to a color mask. And lastly, we'll go to a saturation vibrance mask. So don't miss any of this. Isn't this a cool train image? The stock images, the free stock images are really good on Adobe Stock. So that is a gold mine for us. Now, I'd like to sculpt this smoke a little bit by darkening some of the more shadowy tones in the smoke here. So what I will do first off is I want to darken, so I'm going to use my curves adjustment layer, put a black mask on it to hide it because I'm going to click the multiply blend mode button and put this in a multiply blend mode to darken. And now let's use my little tester to see what kind of a mask I need. A luminosity mask or a zone mask. So I'll click on the zone mask button and I'm going to sample some of this shadowy tone in the smoke here and click OK. And let's see where that sits. Okay, that's sitting right there around a zone 6. So it follows the rule here. It's between a zone 2 and a zone 8. So it's a perfect candidate for a zone mask. And don't forget about this slider here. Because you see right here, I don't want to select too much of this area in here. So what I'll do is I'm going to drag this slider to the right. And you notice when I do that, see how that area gets darkened in there a little bit? See, like right about there. So that's a pretty good zone. All these light areas are those shadow areas. Now, I'd like to tighten this selection up. So I'm going to take this slider and start to drag it into the left just to really isolate those shadow tones a little bit more to maybe somewhere right around there and see how that smoke got really dark. So no effect will be added there. And now all I need to do is output that. So I'm going to output it to the black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection. And now I can simply sculpt that smoke by painting it on, and I think I'll use 20% opacity again. At 20% opacity, I'll just start painting. You see that? And I can just sculpt this smoke, darkening the areas that I want. Now, if I paint in here, nothing will happen because that was really dark in there. So I can just come in here, and remember, every time I lift that brush, I can't say this enough, and start to paint again, it'll get a little bit darker. But this is where you can really tailor this image to look just the way that you want it to look. And that's the excitement and the beauty of the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. I can't stress it enough. It's fantastic. And let me know in the comments section below what you think of the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. And I think I'm pretty good. I'm going to leave this up. Well, I might just get this here a little bit, not much. But I think that's good. But check it out. Here is the before and here's the after. But isn't that cool? Makes the image start to come alive. And now what I want to do is see the darker shadows in the entire image, actually. I'd like to darken those up a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go with a curves adjustment layer. But you notice I have a selection because we can see the selection indicator. So what I need to do is deselect that selection because it'll put that selection onto the mask as soon as I click this. So click this button on the combo or this button on the CX panel, and that will deselect your selection. And now I can click on my curves adjustment, and that'll give me a curves adjustment layer right here. I'm going to, again, use a black mask and a multiply blend mode to darken. And now let me see what kind of a mask I need. So let's click right here on the zone mask, and let's pick some of the dark tones down in here and click OK. And as we can see here, I'm right around the zone 1, slightly over zone 1. So I think a luminosity mask is the best. So just X out of the zone mask, click on the luminosity mask button. And now we can isolate. Let's go to a darks 1. I don't want too broad of a mask. You can see I'd be getting too much dark area here. So let's go to a darks 2 and let's try a darks 3. There's the darks 3. Now, I don't have a tighten and lighten method here in a luminosity mask, but I can use my levels adjustment to tighten and lighten. So I'll click on that. And what I'll do is I'll take this highlight slider and drag it to the left just to lighten all those light areas up a little bit. And I'll take the shadow slider, move it to the right just to tighten everything up. It works kind of like the zone mask, but it is different. It's working with a levels adjustment. And I think that's good. So I'm going to output this to a black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection. And now let's try 20%. And I'm just going to paint on where I want. So I'm going to start painting it here. I'm going to go up. I'm going to go up to like 40% to give me a little bit more there. You can always change your opacity. And let's just test this area right here after I'm lifting the brush actually here and painting again in certain areas. But I like this method because you could make some areas darker, some areas not as dark. Let's check this area out that I just painted. Here's the before, and here's the after. Okay, and I might even go up higher to 50% and just paint on these areas in here. And it's only targeting those shadowy type areas. And I'll just paint over all the shadowy areas here. I'm going to stay off the smoke up in here. But right in here, again, I'll be lifting my brush several times. If you want it stronger in certain areas, just lift and paint again. down in here, over in here. How about like under this train here, right in here? I'll paint across there a couple times in here, maybe over here, but you get the idea. You just paint it wherever you want it to go. Maybe on these little bushes down in here. So check it out. Here is the before and here is the after. If you ever want to see what your mask looks like, just have that layer selected and click the double arrow on the combo or the CX panel. And you can see what the mask looks like that you painted. And there it is right there. Click it again and you see your image again. And again, here's the before and here is the after. And now let's move on to a color mask. Now, color mask is pretty easy to determine when to use it. When you have a lot of certain isolated colors, that's a good time. Then you want a color mask. So what I want to do here is increase the red saturation on the train cars. This saturation up here is good, but these cars, I think they need more saturation in the red. The best mask for the job is the color mask, so click on the color mask button. Now you notice I do have a selection, but not a problem. I don't have to deselect it because as soon as I click on this color mask button, the selection goes away. So now I can just sample some of the red in here. So if I click right here and click OK, you see how I just selected that really nicely. So what I can do is we have these adjustments here so we can narrow the range here. So let me drag this slider into the right and see what happens. Now see, that's eliminating some of that red up in there. So I'm going to drag it to the left a little bit more right there. And let me see if I pull this slider into the left. If I, yeah, see, I can get more isolation when I do that. When I pull this in, it's too much. Maybe right about there. Now I can lighten it up here like this. And we can also adjust the feathering here. If I drag this into the left, see how it'll feather that in. So we can just really refine this mask. I don't want to include this area here, and I'm not going to paint this adjustment on. So what I'm going to do is grab my lasso tool. If you type L for the lasso tool, and what I want to do is just lasso around these red cars, just like this. Like that. And then if you click this button here, this is the mask button. If you click it, a feather selection dialog comes up, and you can have feathering on it if you want to, but if you click cancel, you'll get no feathering. And see, it's just selected those areas right there. Now you can see some little light areas here. This is not really going to affect anything, but you could click the black brush icon, and I'm going to go to 100%. I'm typing my 0 key to get to 100%, and I could paint that off of there. And up in here, if I don't want any of this in here, again, it really would not affect anything, to be honest with you. But you could do that if you need to. And now we need to output this. So I want to make adjustment for the color. I'm going to bring up the saturation. So let's use a hue sat adjustment layer. So click this button right here. That'll give you a hue sat adjustment layer. And I like to still use the target tool, even though I've really targeted those colors. But you can see I can take the saturation and just pull it up here. I could do that very easily. Or if I double click saturation, that'll reset itself, or use the target tool. I always like to use the target tool. So click on the target tool and you can just click and start to drag it to the right. And you see how that just targets that red color, like right about there. And then you could also come back here and change this to master. And I can still pull up the master a little bit if I need to. But you notice this is not getting affected. So check this out. Here is the before and here's the after. So it just brings up the saturation on those red cars. That's how easy it is to use a color mask. It'll just target the colors you want. So remember, it's a good mask to use whenever you have a lot of a certain color. You could just target that color. So that one's pretty easy to determine when to use it. Well, that's the color mask. Now when I look at this image, I love the cars now, but I wish the greens and the weaker colors in this image would come up, and that is where a vibrance mask comes in. So if you click this icon right here, you're going to open up your saturation vibrance mask. When do you use a vibrance mask? If you have colors that are kind of low and you want to bring up those colors, think vibrance. So vibrance will bring up weaker colors. And so I'm going to click on the left side here, which is vibrance. The right side is saturation. Right now it's on saturation 1. I'm going to click Vibrance 1. Notice that the train cars that I brought the saturation up are dark, so they're not targeted. So that's good. They're not going to get much saturation. So I'm going to click 2, and you'll notice they'll get even darker. And I'm going to click 3, All right, and this is good. Now, if I click 4, okay, so that doesn't look as good. It looks a little mottled up in here too. These are JPEG images, by the way. But let's go back to a 3, and I think 3 is isolating just what I need to isolate here. Now, you'll find more times than not that the 3 and the 4 vibrance masks are going to be about the best mask to use for your vibrance adjustments. The lightest areas are the lowest saturated areas. The darker areas are more saturated areas. So we're targeting all of the low saturated areas. Now all we need to do is output this in. Generally what you're going to want to use is a hue saturation adjustment. So click on this button right here. And now I'm just going to take the overall saturation and start to pull it to the right. And you notice it's only pulling up the weaker colors. It's not touching these red train cars. So just like that, I think that's pretty good. There's some color coming into the smoke here, but I'll show you how we can fix that. On the hue saturation layer we just made, click on the layer mask itself. Make sure you have a black brush. If you don't, you can just click this icon right here to get a black brush, or this icon in the CX panel. This is the combo panel, by the way. I'm using 100% opacity, nice soft edge brush, and now we can simply paint off any of that color that's in that smoke that we don't want in there. Just like that, very simple, very easy. And just paint that color off, and that's all there is to it. So let's take a look. Here is the before, and here is the after, but see how that vibrance adjustment has really pulled up the colors. Now the image looks more in balance. One final image, one final example. This is going to be the saturation mask. Now, what is a saturation mask used for? First, let me click on this button right here, and this will open up our saturation and vibrance masks. We have vibrance on the left and saturation on the right. All the light tones on this mask are the areas that are very saturated. The darker tones are less saturated. And if I click on the double arrow icon, you can see this image is really oversaturated in not all the areas, but a lot of areas, like up in the sky and some of the reds in here, and down in this water here, and this yellow spot right over here. It's a really cool image, but it's a little bit oversaturated in certain areas. But let me show you how I like to use the saturation mask. Now, you could use a hue saturation adjustment layer to tone down the color with the saturation mask, or you can use the method that I'm going to show you now, which is my favorite method. I'll click this double arrow button again so we can see the mask itself. And of course, we have the different ranges here that we can go through. Here's saturation 1, here's 2, here's 3. So you can target the areas that you want. In my case, I think 1 is good because I want to target the sky and I want to target this water in this yellow area over here. And I think that's a good one. But check this out. You see this button here. Let's call it a hamburger menu. Click on this button and you see this icon right here. It looks like a paintbrush with red and gray. Okay, so click on this and check this out. Here's what you're going to get. A blank pixel layer in the saturation blend mode. Set you up with a gray brush. Gray is for removing saturation. Red is to add saturation. So you just have to paint on here, okay? It's very simple and easy to do and very effective. Now, I highly recommend that you start out with a 20% opacity. You can always adjust from there on the brush. So I'm going to type my 2 key to get 20% opacity. And now what I want to do is remove some of the oversaturated red areas. Watch, and I'll just paint across here. And you see how that saturation just starts to come down? And if you overdo an area, I'll show you what you can do. Like, for instance, up here in the sky, if I get rid of some of this blue, if I get rid of too much, we have a gray and a red swatch, right? The red will add saturation, the gray removes, so I just remove. So if I type my X key and I flop this to a red, now I can just paint some of that saturation back. So if I messed up in an area and I want a little bit more saturation, like right in here, I can get it. Okay, so now I'm going to type my X key and go to gray again. And I just want to tone down some of the water saturation in here. Just painting across here. And again, the same principle holds. If you lift and repaint, you'll build up. So right in here, now here's this yellow here. Now let me take this down in here a little bit. And say I take it too far, type my X key, and I can just add a little bit more back in there. And say I want to bring this saturation up here. I'm still on red. I'll make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm just using my left bracket key here, and I can just paint over this like that and bring up some of that saturation there. And just like that, here's the before and here is the after. Again, the before and the after. But that is the saturation mask, and that is such a cool tool to work with. And let me know in the comments section what you think. In fact, I'm going to switch to my gray brush again. I'm typing my X key. I think I'm a little hot here, so I'll hit that there a couple times. But there you go. That's the saturation mask. And I should say this, that was a saturation mask combined with saturation painting. Painting with either a red or a gray brush in the saturation blend mode. And you are painting on a blank pixel layer. So that's what happened when I clicked on that hamburger menu and chose that option for saturation painting. Well, there it is, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's masking workshop. Hey.
Okay. And we're back. I hope that was informative. Anybody still here?
Oh, yeah, it was very great. It was great, great, great.
So that basically, we wanted to just show you what the masking part, there's so many facets to this program. I think it's the best value in photography myself. I use it probably on every image. On the flower that Amy did, I use it to choke down all the little reflected highlights. I used, a light 6 to get the polka dots and made them brighter and added some color back through there. So that's, the strength of it. So any
Well,
comments, Allan?
Yeah, I'll make a comment because I am underwhelmed with what that adds to my workflow. You introduced me to this about 4 years ago, and I tried my best to I guess most everything that he was doing I can do in Photoshop to get such a similar result, but in a fraction of the time. It seems like a very convoluted way to do things. I agree that it's clever the way that he sets up the masks, but at the end of the day, it looked like the smoke coming out of the train chimney. I could have done that with a darken brush in just a couple of swipes over the dark areas.
It depends on whether you're a Van Eyck or an impressionist.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what you consider to be the end result, and I seldom do I ever find myself in a situation where the kind of differences that he was showing would really even have been noticeable to me. Anyway, I get that it's a powerful and useful tool. I just don't quite see where I would use it. Does anybody else agree? Does anybody else think this is a lot of extra
There's
work?
a couple of things, Allan, I have on this in terms of partly it's understanding for me because I'm not using Photoshop, but also the some bit I do understand. First one, Bud, is most of what he's doing here and with what you do with the tool, this is non-destructive editing, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, so if you go straight for a brush on the image, that's going to be destructive, isn't it?
Unless you use a
Well,
smart
not
object.
if you were using a smart object and putting it on an extra layer.
Okay, but I'm looking at this, Bud, from the point of view of, I can't make use of the palette because of using affinity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working this out from the basis of, I think I can do this in Affinity, but I'm going to have to do it the long-handed way. So the masks and this sort of thing. And I think the biggest bit for me is the ability with a mask to, you know, select the bits you want to do through how you set the mask and effectively the shading. Whereas if you've just got the image, and even if you do with a layer and you take the brush to it, which you can then switch on and off, but what you're not really doing with,
and change the blend mode. You can do all of these things with the tools that already exist in Photoshop.
Right.
yeah, I'm with that, because all he's doing is making use of those tools. So I'm not seeing, what I'm seeing is that this is providing the shortcuts to get into those. You know, you go into on the palette, and that's where I'm stuffed as far as, yeah, I've got to do it the long-handed way. I've got to go in, I've got to create the mask, I've got to get the area isolated by doing the settings on it, etc. Set all of that up. Whereas the palette takes you in, you know, almost, you know, through the front door and straight into the room you want to be in. Whereas I'm going to have to go through several doors to get there.
You know, Alan, I don't use it, but maybe once or twice on an entire edit. So most of what I do is like you. But if I got to a point where I have to refine something, that's what I use it for. You know, it's a instead of a bigger brush, it's a fine tooth. It's a fine brush. That's the only.
No, I definitely see how you would use it and when you would use it, and I see the advantages of using it. I'm not sure I see the advantages of using it in my workflow. It doesn't seem to be a real time saver or result in a significant difference in the final picture. But yeah, you could certainly argue that's because I don't know how to use the damn thing, but that's always a possibility. Yeah, I think at $25, I'll get the panel and I'll try working with it. I'm just a skeptic right now that it's going to add anything to it. I would love to know whether or not, Klaus, if you use it.
Klaus here.
I have not used it. I know nothing about Photoshop, so to me, this is the interest in this would be, does it you know, soften the learning curve on some of the things that I might want to do? I'm really kind of here because I recently just kind of dedicated myself to the idea of actually learning Photoshop. My Photoshop knowledge is just totally minimal. So does this make it easier, or does it add complexity to Photoshop? That would be my primary question.
Well, there's so much to the panel besides masking. If you wanted to do anything from dodging and burning to an Orton effect, or, I mean, if you go through the button by button thing from Sean Bagshaw and you see what all is in here, masking is 5% of it. The rest of them are just actions that make your life better.
Jeff, are you using this panel?
No, I just started learning it just like Klaus. But I'm also a strong believer in using macros to simplify operations. So I do see the benefit of it.
Right.
But there's a learning curve required for that, like any other tool.
Got it. Yeah, fair enough.
Can I just say, Alan?
Yes, John.
I a couple of years ago, I took a year to really learn as much as I could about Photoshop. Took some pictures, but still really focused on learning. And during that, I got the Lumenzia, which is the Greg Benz version of TK. And I found that learning Lumenzia really helped me learn Photoshop. You know, after learning about Lumenzia, I knew more about masks, about blending modes, and so it was a really helpful tool to have with all the stuff that if you're trying to learn Photoshop just hits you in the face. And and I'd used it for years and didn't know anything about Photoshop, but still, just kept using the basics. But that really took me to another level. So, but it's better for landscapes. So I haven't found a use for it in macro, not really. But landscapes, it's amazing because what it does best is contrast. So you can get much better contrast with it. When you're looking at rocks, or you're looking at buildings, or you're looking at all these big items, and shading and color contrast. So it's very good for that.
That is a very interesting observation, and certainly I would agree that in learning how to, the first time I dove into this, I did learn a lot about Photoshop in the process. So good point and well taken. Susan had a question.
Yes, if you install TK9, how does it integrate with Photoshop? In other words, can I install it but not turn it on all the time?
So absolutely.
Okay, so they're
How so? How do you do it, Bud?
Can I go and share my screen to Photoshop?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question, Susan. I've wondered the same thing.
So can you see my screen first off?
Yep.
Okay, so Susan, over here, if I click on this, it expands out. So if you click on these two arrows up here at the top, it folds up. And the same over here. I can go to Navigator and I can have, looking at a picture, I don't have to have TK open at all. So, I have it as a tab. If I want it, I've got it. I've got export here, so I can do all of the stuff that send something to Allan or to put it on a web page. All of that stuff is right here, and there's a whole video on how to use it. It's not pricey, but and this is, I think, free. I can't remember, but down here I have the magic mixer. So I've got color, I've got the gen fill down here. So I've got them as tabs that I can access them or not. Does that explain it?
Yep.
Right now I'm on the laptop, so my desk space is kind of at a premium, and what I would do would like to manage the panels such that I could get back to just the tools that are in the other panels that are in Photoshop.
Do you see I'm at the top now on plugins on Photoshop?
Okay.
You see the drop down?
Yes.
So as you drop down, here's the CX, the combo. The CX and combo are the same. The CX is a skinny one for laptops, and the combo is a fatter one. If I click on the combo, where to go? Anyway, here's the CX. You see how it's skinny and the other one's just a more square one.
So you can't really, are you saying you can't really get down to a screen that looks like Photoshop?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is the navigator. That's everything Photoshop is now showing. There's no TK out there.
Bud, can I share?
Yes, please. Let me get out of it. Go.
Let's see. I have it entirely in a panel over here. I move everything to the left side simply because it's closer to the drop downs.
Yeah, I do too.
So everything is in a panel here in just one thing, but it looks just like Photoshop, but I have access to everything all in a single click, and it doesn't take up much space. So if you're concerned about real estate.
And you can drag those panels and drop them in on the left-hand side even further, right? You can put them over the...
Yeah, I pulled this off of the here.
Right.
And you know, you can drag them and use them where you want
Yeah,
for whatever real estate you need to clear up.
that's a nice picture, by the way. Very nice.
Yeah, and it's basically like any other Photoshop tool. If you aren't using it, it's not visible per se. So, so it just kind of sits there waiting to be used.
Very good. Any other questions for Bud or for Jeff? Graham, you've been, should I say, uncharacteristically quiet this morning?
Yeah, I'm just considering whether I ought to lose a bit of weight and move from a combo to a CX. But yeah, I'm on holiday. I've just driven down to Falmouth in Cornwall today, so I'm rather jet lagged. And but I was going to say, from my perspective, the amount of I fully understand the use of this TK. I've got it. This TK9, but I do wonder about the amount of time I'm going to have to spend learning it, and whether I'd do better spending time on the practical side of the photography, because I've rather like Allan, I've learned, well, not like Allan, but I've learned the basics of Photoshop and, you know, dodging and burning and layers and etc. And so I just wondered whether, you know, how much effort I'm going to have to put in to master it.
I don't think much, because I've been using it for a long time and I use it selectively, but at the same time, it didn't take long.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't know me though.
Oh, I'm 64 and I'm slow.
I'm 71.
I'm
Well,
77.
I'm certainly willing to give it a good Boy Scout try. Yeah, definitely. Well, anything else? That was very good, Bud. Thank you for doing that and setting that up. That was very interesting and very thorough. I will report back in a few weeks when it's either driven me mad or I've got it figured out a little bit.
Well, it comes down to playing with it. You just put up an image and you're not planning to do anything. You just go through the buttons, you see what it'll do, and all of a sudden, you know, some light bulb will go off because you would have loved to have done that on a prior picture. And so, you know, 30 minutes of playing with it and you're good to go.
30 minutes free time, you mean?
I know you don't have it.
I've never heard of that before. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I remember one instructional video I saw. It said, "What you do, just put up an image and just slam the sliders. Just see what happens. Just
Heck yeah,
just
that
go
is
for it.
Just have fun, play with it. Yeah.
Can I take just 2 minutes to ask if anybody has a request or a recommendation or a thought about what we can do in AfterStack 8? Because otherwise, Bud and I will think something up.
What about using like a graphics tablet pointers? I'm just starting to use a graphics tablet, and
Allan promised to do that sometime. You want to do that, Allan?
Yeah, that will be fun. Are you talking about a graphics tablet with a picture and a stylus, or just the tablet part?
Well, there's two types. I'm currently using the one with the picture because basically because of my acquired learning disability. Using a tablet and going to the main screen just doesn't work well for me. But using the picture one does work because it's like an iPad. But pointers on.
I'm thinking of getting an iPad Pro that will allow it to be used with a stylus.
No, when you sidecar an iPad to use as a graph, it doesn't work well.
Doesn't work as well. Yeah.
But the XP Pen is a very inexpensive graphics tablet, and I got the fairly large one, and it works as a second monitor on your screen, and it does do fairly well. But there's probably some pointers for people who have been using graphics tablets longer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using one for ages and love it, but not the kind with the picture on it. Well, let me look into that, and and Bud and I will come up with something, but
If any
it's-
of you have pictures, you know, to play with or whatever we did, you know,
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah.
Amy was kind enough to share hers, and
that was good, Amy. Thank you.
I-
So
I-
how do you upload an image to you on Discord?
Yep.
Okay.
you can do it on Discord. I had
And what
Amy
type of
send
file?
it to me by WeTransfer because it was a big file.
Okay, WeTransfer or Discord. Okay.
Yeah.
You want raw file?
I prefer them.
Okay.
And if you have a, what do you call it? A linear profile.
Okay.
You can either send it to me and I'll install it because I have a Nikon. So if you
I
have
have an-
another type of camera,
Yeah, I have the Nikon, so.
yeah, then you'll be fine. Well, except I won't have it for your camera unless you have a Z7 II.
No, I'm at the D500.
So you'll have to,
Nice.
I'll
I
save
can
the,
download D500 and install it. It's no problem.
Okay.
But if you send me something, let me know your camera model and type so I
Okay.
can go to Tony Kuiper's and download it because
Okay.
some of them need it, some of them don't, but I won't know what you're sending me.
got it.
You know, I did get the using the video on the compound microscope to be able to stack a slide. And I found that I can do it. So next week I'll show you how I did it.
Great.
I would
And
love that, yeah, because I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
getting into that.
yeah, because I using my my DSLR actually wound up being the better camera to use. But the basic technique is just go like 60 frames per second and just slowly advance the focus. And then I use Topaz.
As you're
Yeah, I took about 20 seconds to move maybe 2 millimeters. So just very slow and do 60 frames a second to get the most samples. Then I use Topaz Video AI to strip to TIFFs. And, you know, it's stacked beautifully. And
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's plan on
Yeah,
let's plan
definitely.
on doing that. That would be, in
That's
fact,
outstanding, yes.
let's plan on doing that if you're comfortable with it during the Zoom meeting next week,
okay.
rather than rather than in AfterStack. Maybe in AfterStack we can talk about the tablet and maybe look at your editing of that picture. I'd also like to get Bud to show us some of what he's been doing with his new microscope, which is really pretty cool. So that would be good to cover next time.
Mhm.
All right, guys, we're at a conclusion. Thanks everybody for coming. What part of Cornwall are you in, Graham?
Falmouth, right down on the bottom southwest.
Absolutely gorgeous. Is it weather nice?
It's going to be pouring all week.
Yes, there you go. There you go. A good English
Good old
holiday.
British weather.
All right, everybody. Have a great week, and
You too.
Look forward to seeing you during the week.
Hey, Alan, you can cut my fumble out of the video.
No, I'm going to actually run it on a loop at the beginning. You guys have a great week.
All right, you
take
too.
care.
All right, goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.